Hello and welcome. My name is Maria Victoria Perez, and I am the Director of Care and Wellbeing. I use she, her pronouns, and Maria Victoria is my first name. Welcome to our first ever Parent Orientation Book Club session. We are so excited about this session, and this session was made possible through the generous donation of Ruth Cox and Milton Chen. A little bit about the order of events before we get started. I will go through a short presentation, and then we'll introduce our therapists and start our Q&A and then a conversation. We won't be answering questions during the presentation, but you can certainly ask them in the Q&A box, which should be located at the bottom right-hand corner of your Zoom box. So we're going to get started here so I can get into the presentation. Okay, great. So you are in the session of how to partner in supporting your student at CalArts. We really wanted to create a session to think about how the work that myself, the therapist, and other student affairs staff members could really engage in throughout the year. And truly what it was is that we value partnerships with parents, right? So parents can't be everywhere all the time, especially during college, but there's still ways in which that we can help each other out in order to support the students at CalArts. A little bit of an overview about what we'll go through today is from the book that we read, The Stress Years of Their Lives. And so we're going to cover, this book covers so much. So if you haven't gotten through it yet, that's okay. If you haven't ordered it yet, that's okay. But I do recommend this book covers a lot of things in which really gives you as a parent and us as professionals and even students to read this book, so perspectives about student success and their time during college. So today we'll go over intensive parenting mistakes, social emotional readiness, barriers to the success, resilience and safety nets, crisis care, and then of course resources. So the first one that we'll go through is intensive parenting mistakes. I love this GIF, and this is not meant to be a judgment on you as parents. It is not meant to kind of take you down, but what we really want to say and really kind of honor that just by the nature of generation change, things that happen in the world, we have led ourselves to get to a type of place where we are over preparing our students, we're over parenting them, and we're over investing in them. And so not necessarily these things bad stand alone, but of course, just like I love donuts, but in small doses, right? So everything needs to come to that. And so that really leads to impact on youth. And really it's about failure and risk and what that looks like for our students. And failure and risk is extremely important for our students to experience. They grow in that area. So we're also looking at self-branding and emphasis on externals. So are students also looking at themselves to say, my only value of myself as a person, as a student, is the grades that I get and the output that I give out to the world. And while it's important, obviously, to pass your classes and produce artwork, because that's why we're here, it's not necessarily the defining factor of students, particularly about their GPA, their SAT score, look how much work my student has produced. So we really want to kind of pull back just a tad to really kind of engage our students to start letting have some agency on who they are as a person and also their role in college now. So balance requires promoting a lot of things, right? And so a few of the things that we want to talk about when we're balancing is the social emotional readiness of our students, executive functioning skills, and sometimes this tends to be this discussion of executive functioning skills is left to folks who have differing abilities, but the fact of the matter is that we're all in this space where we have executive functioning skills, and sometimes they operate higher than others on certain days. So we're talking about self-management, we're talking about self-organization, self-restraint, self-motivation, emotional regulation. Can I regulate my emotions, that I can feel something about passionately about something, but I'm able to also pull that back and move forward with still having some of my emotions. So we're talking about overcoming and balancing mindsets and barriers, partnering with students and parents. It's not one thing or another. It's not just the parents who are supporting, and it's not just the school who's supporting, right? Sometimes we see as professionals that some students think, hey, you know what, my child is going off to college, and I'm just gonna dump them and leave them for 4 years. Good luck. This is yours now. And really that's not helpful either, right? So you know your student better than we do. And there's some partnership in a way that we can help balance and support the students. And then social safety nets. What does that look like for you and how you're taking care of yourself as a parent who has children in college, but also how are you providing social safety nets and talking and asking directly to your student, who's around? Who do you think, if this happens, who do you call? And I know that seems so basic and 101, but sometimes some of the students hasn't quite put two of these pieces together. And that's because a period of transition is a lot that we're jamming information into their heads constantly about how a new world works, right? They were in K through 12 systems prior, or a different college, and they're now having to learn a whole new system that is CalArts, which isn't exactly easy to learn. CalArts likes to experiment in different ways, and we do things differently, and so sometimes that can be quite confusing. So social emotional readiness. I know this is a lot on one slide, as I'm anti this, but it is so important for you to understand about what is social emotional and readiness and what that looks like, particularly for your student. And really, it's a huge predictor about how successful are students going to be, not just in college, but also as they transition into life. And I won't read through all of these, but are they willing to own one's actions? If something goes wrong and they made a mistake, it's so vital and important to say, I was wrong, or I made a mistake, or I missed that deadline. How can I move forward? If students aren't able to kind of navigate some of that and own one's actions, it can keep them back a little bit, because it can keep them fearful of asking for help when they actually really need to engage in help during college. Self-management, more than ever with COVID, is so important, because we're talking about the ability to take care of your day-to-day activities, schedule your classes, schedule out, the assignments in your syllabus. Are you still able to eat, right? We want our students to still engage in activities that take care of their overall care and well-being. And self-management is very important. Self-control is something that we look at with students, particularly about success. Are they able to limit their desires or urges or their time on the internet? Are they able to limit to not stay up till 4 in the morning, Monday through Friday, or 7 days a week, just chatting with their friends and understanding what that might be doing to them, because now they've missed assignments. Now they're exactly tired. And the more that they lose out on sleep, that starts to pile up and does have an impact. And then we look at open mindset and help seeking. And that, to us, myself, and I can speak for the therapist, is so important. Are they ready to ask for help when they need it? And not to a point where things have like tumbled down a hill and everything's shattered to pieces. That's an important time to ask for help, for sure. But can they ask for help on the way down, so that we can build that safety net? And safety nets come from family, friends. Safety nets also come from the institution. And so this is where we kind of want to engage in some of that dialogue about what this particularly looks like with parents and CalArts as staff members, and you having those conversations with your student. Risk management. College is a lot of risk. I'm not going to be, I'm going to be quite frank about it. Students, as if you've gone to college, you can reflect back on your journey, but also all of the risks that are out there now. We have an additional layer of COVID to add to that, and having those hard conversations. Are students accepting that they can make risk? And then when is it too dangerous? And do they understand to say no and step back from that, right? Because risk is not bad. We just want to make sure that they understand where it's a line and where it is actually dangerous. Okay, so into some of the barriers in which some of our college students are facing. there are three barriers that the book particularly points out, but that we also see as limits to success, right? So not belonging socially, fear of not making it, and I'm okay, I don't need help kind of mentality. The not belonging socially, friends are a prerequisite to learning. And I mean that in a way that it's not they can't learn in isolation, because some of this obviously because of COVID is learning in isolation, but that if they don't have these shared experiences and challenges, it can't create these boundaries, they can't create this trust, it can't create these learning narratives that hearing from someone else with a different perspective, even if I don't agree with them, also benefits me in my education and learning. So that's particularly what we meant. We also don't mean that students have to make 100+ friends. It needs to be a manageable group, and it can be a handful of people. I think that if any of us reflect on our time in high school or reflect on our time in college, can we think about how many people we're actually still friends with and actually still communicate with to this day? And mine really break down to like on a hand, about 5 people I still talk to from my college days, and less than, there were about 2 people from my high school days. So it's important to not put this overall pressure that students have to make hundreds of friends in order to be successful, and that's not true. They will make friends. They just have to make sure that they're also putting in the time and effort to making those friends based on the resources that are provided to them and engaging. It's a two-way kind of street. I'm going to reach out, people were going to reach out, and engaging in some of those activities. So it does take time to belong. So if your student's like, I don't know anybody, I haven't made friends, and it's the end of week 1 of next week, patience. It does take time. People are navigating this platform. Our institution is putting out events, and students will be able to make friends moving forward. Fear of not making it. This is really kind of broken down in how we over-prepare students, in the sense that they enter college into the spaces with some of these preconceived notions that I don't belong here, or if some of you might heard called imposter syndrome. But what we know is that students who are materially resourced, meaning that they have funds and have had the support system, develop these kind of striving perfectionism mindsets that basically leads to a fear of failure down the line. So that if they don't get an A+ on something, that they're not good, right? It's kind of going back to that self-branding. I am only my output, I am only the grades I earn, and we're trying to unlearn some of that behavior. And really, CalArts is this experiment in fear inoculation, meaning that we need to give and expose our students to failure. And particularly because I say that because we don't have grades. I don't know if you've heard that or not. We don't have letter grades, the A, B, C plus kind of stuff. We're based on a high pass, pass, low pass system, because what our faculty are looking for is not whether or not they're hitting everything A+, but they want to look for the growth in the student. They want to have the students be able to fail on one assignment and come back up and be able to say, oh, the student did so well, and still be able to earn a high pass in a course. So it's really about the process. And as one of my mentors say, you have to trust the process and engage with the work and what that looks like. And on the flip side of those students who are fearing failure, there are some students who also come from backgrounds that are materially underfunded. These students feel like they can't keep up, they're not cut out for college, they don't belong here, you know, and they won't be able to fit in. And so we also need to grasp onto those students and have those conversations with students about, you belong here, you create a lot of diversity within our institution, and you also belong here just like anyone else, and not failure on their end to say, at times it might feel like that, but it doesn't mean that it's blanket all of that. And so engaging them in those conversations. And like I said, by keeping failure away from these students, fewer opportunities allow them to make mistakes or learn from their mistakes. And we really want them to engage in making mistakes and saying, this happened, okay, and then how do I move up moving forward, right? So it's not about how you fail, it's how you get up, and that's what we're trying to engage our students moving forward. And the third barrier is I'm okay and I don't need help, right? And so I don't know how many times as a professional I've engaged students where I can see it written all over their face, or I've been contacted by a faculty member, or it's something that I know that they're like, no, I'm fine. It's really engaging in them and saying, listen, there are certain issues at play here and that's okay. We just need to put the pieces together so we can move forward, right? And I like to think about it and talk with both parents and students is like, this is not a barrier that we want to walk around. It's a barrier we want to remove. We want to put a plan in place so that we can remove that from the students so they can move through and not around. Because when we start to avoid things, they just start to build up. So we're looking at having conversations with your student. Do they have pre-existing learning issues? When they experience increased demands of stress, how are they reacting? What's the plan for that? Do they have pre-existing or incipient mental health care problems or just the onset of those problems, right? And if they do, it's okay to kind of establish a plan with the institution about what that might look like, at least connecting to the resources so that if something happens, you know what to do moving forward. Because what we don't want is our students to understand like, oh, if I'm having a depressive episode, I'm by myself in this, and then I guess I just need to fail out of college. And that's something that we don't want anyone to engage in. And that if you're a parent, knowing and understanding that you can work with your students to say, you know what, I remember we could go to speak to Maria Victoria. You know what, I remember we could go ask help from this office. So that it doesn't kind of take them down, because we want them to succeed and again, work through that. Okay, so building through all of this is resilience and safety nets, and there is no more time to build resiliency that we're all not experiencing right now because of COVID, is what that looks like. And resiliency is not an individual feature. It's not just one person doing that, but it's embedded in the context of social, familiar, and college cultures. What does it look like for your student? Who are they going to reach out to help? Do they have other peers in college? Who in the family do they reach out for certain things when they're struggling with something? What does that look like for you? What is the honest conversations you have with your students about if they're in trouble or if they're feeling something that they know, right? That they can call you at any time. And, you know, students know that, but sometimes they also have to just be told that or invited to be told that. And then also, what are the college cultures? How can we help engage students for safety nets and to build resilience through something? So again, this is about building that tough skin, about saying, I failed, but now I'm going to get up and we're going to move through something in order to continue to move forward, right? So it's that recovery strength, it's that recovery spirit that we're looking to build within our students and ourselves. So 6 pillars of resilience here. Kind of go back into a little bit of emotional readiness that we talked about at the beginning. We're talking about self-regulation, strength of character, optimism, connection, mental agility, and self-awareness. And some of these pieces tie in about how well is a student taking care of themselves. And it kind of goes back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? And for those who don't know, is it's food, water, and shelter. And if students don't have that in a basic way, can they be successful? That's that self-regulation. It's the mental agility. If you're running on 6 cups of coffee a day and you have like 2 hours of sleep, that's not going to exactly build resilience. It's going to move you back from that because you're just so exhausted to engage with the work that is difficult. What's that connection? Where does that belong with students? And so we really want to make sure that they're connected to resources, they're connected to you, and that they're also aware about what's going on, that parents are aware of what's going on. It's those little tiny words sometimes when you call home and you're just like, oh, you could just hear it in the student's voice, moving forward. Okay, crisis care. So at some point, crisis is going to happen to your student. And I say that because I view crisis as a very giant umbrella, and that can very much be, I'm fighting with my best friend, I broke up with my partner, I had a fight with my mom, I got a really bad critique, or someone passed away in my family, or I broke my leg, right? So crisis can vary across the continuum for me and is really different for students. And really what I want to say is that we always prioritize safety first at CalArts. That is what we view. Is the student safe? And how, if they're not safe, how do we get them to safety? And that's kind of what we can navigate. Students in crisis also may not realize how bad things are. So they may be sharing all of these things via text to you, or over the phone, or calling you every day. And then sometimes what I like to say is act as a mirror, reflect back to them about what you're hearing. A few of the other things is don't ignore or minimize seemingly small losses. And this is really important because sometimes it's not necessarily the small loss that really kind of put the student in crisis. It just happened to be the last thing that they could take on before kind of navigating a crisis. Or to them, it's very important. So them breaking up with their partner may not seem that inconsequential to someone who's lived a life, you know, dating and figuring it out and all that stuff, right? But also in their moment in time during this crisis of COVID and transition to college and trying to do all of the stuff, it can be very impactful for them. And we really want to kind of navigate that. So when social life fails, college fails. So it's really important to understand and make sure that your students, again, is connected. CalArts will make sure that we're trying to do as much as we can in this virtual world to connect students. Classes are a good way. And then just by the nature of our institution is set up to engage students in this particular way so that they're able to make the connections around. If you're feeling like your student is struggling, that's another reason to reach out. We can help navigate and provide additional information, because never can I ask a student to remember all of the orientation information that they're getting even within the last 2 weeks, right? We've spread it out, they've taken the time to do it, but sometimes when we're in crisis, we don't quite connect to that logical side of our brain and be like, oh, right, MVP said if I do this, X, Y, and Z. And so we're happy to make those connections as well. Okay, so now I want to talk about our resources available for the students on campus. And so this is really not an exhaustive list. This is really kind of what we want to touch in about our area. And then we're always happy to act like a guide for students to navigate difficult structures around CalArts or policies, or if something's confusing, or maybe you don't know who to go and you've been turned around 6 times. But this is a little bit about what we want to share with you. So we have mental health counselors at CalArts. We have 3 licensed therapists that you're going to meet shortly. The sessions are free to students regardless of what insurance that they hold. Referrals are available that they can navigate and work with students, so that as they're navigating sessions or something is explained to a therapist and they feel like, you know what, I think this person might be able to help you with X, Y, and Z. So they help navigate that process. Spanish is available as speaking terms, but we also have translation available at the request of the student, because what we know and value is that sometimes when you're in crisis or you're trying to explain an experience, that sometimes when you are speaking in your native language or your native tongue or using your native tongue, that you're able to express yourself in a way that you can't do maybe primarily in English. So that is something that's available just to think about. We do have a 24-hour crisis counseling line that is dedicated for CalArts students. They can call this 24/7, doesn't matter what time of day, doesn't matter if it's a weekend, doesn't matter if it's a holiday. This is something that's referred to them. It's just like having a mini counseling session with our 3 therapists, and it's confidential. So that's something that if you are at home with your student and they feel like you're struggling, you can call for them. I've done that myself with a student sitting here, and it's after hours, and you know, here's someone you can talk to and what might be some coping skills they can kind of navigate moving forward. There's also language translation available for students who are interested in that as well. So this is a service that's brand new this year, and I'm actually quite excited about this. Our new health insurance company has provided this partnership with Healthiest You. And so if your student has our student health insurance plan, the telehealth and the telemental health and the telepsych are free to the student. Are free to the student. And if they are not on our student health insurance plan, they can still utilize these services and pay the fees that are listed here. It is also, the student can also request a reimbursement slip so that can be submitted to your insurance out-of-network claims. But this is something that we are excited to have, particularly for the psychiatrist aspect. Sometimes we know that it can take a very long time for students to get in to see psychiatrists. And this is something so that if they're running out of medication or need to have something navigated with a therapist, that this is something that students can utilize as well. And so this information, if you're looking forward, it's going to be up on our website, and it's also on the health insurance website as well if the students have it. Okay, and so the other thing too I want to talk about is the online care report. So if you are concerned about your student and you feel like they're not listening to you, let us know. And this form lives online. It's a public facing form. Parents can fill it out. And this is where you give us some of your information, and then one professional staff member will follow up with the student in order to engage them in some kind of intervention. And I don't mean that in a way that it's just going to be dramatic, but it's like, what can we do to help you on this end? And it might just be repeating the same information you already shared with them, but again, it's that partnership to reinforcing this. So in order to find this form, you can Google CalArts Care, and it should be the first thing that pops up. And so you can see there's a whole slew of information about students in crisis on there, what a community of care that we value, and then also the reporting form. Also, if you know your student has a disability or is navigating mental health or has got a new diagnosis of that, they can always reach out to our disability services office and fill out a public accommodation request form to get those reasonable accommodations to help them navigate college with a little bit of help to kind of make sure that the access to education is a little bit more equitable. Okay, so with that being said, I'm going to transition now into our next part of our program. And so we welcome you to ask your questions. Let us know how you thought of the book if you read it, or anything of the sort, anything that I talked about today. If you want to speak, you can please raise your little blue hand on the participants feature on the bottom right of your Zoom screen. If you want to ask questions, again, it's the Q&A feature at the bottom right of your screen. And we'll go back and forth during the event, and we're happy to hear what you have to say, the questions that you want to know. We'll share some additional information in the chat. So without ado, I'm going to go into introducing, or they're going to introduce themselves, our wonderful therapy team.
Hi, I'm Randè Dorn. I'm one of the therapists here at CalArts. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, specializing working with artists. I'm also an alum of CalArts, so I got my MFA in the dance school for dance and choreography many moons ago. So I'm really happy to be here and to work with your students.
Hello everyone, my name is Melissa Shepard-Williams. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I am a licensed marriage and family therapist, also specializing in work with artists, and I am thankful to be here of support to you.
Hi, I'm Lily Rodriguez, and I'm new to CalArts. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. I'm a licensed marriage family therapist, and I've worked with young adults and families for many years, and I also have MFA from the San Francisco Art Institute, so I'm excited to be here in this setting and working with artists.
Thank you, for sure. So please, if you haven't already, let's talk about your questions. Raise your little blue hand if you'd like to have a conversation. We really mean for this to be a very organic experience. Again, you could use the little Q&A chat box in the bottom right. You can raise your little blue Zoom hand via the participants and it says raise hand. You can click on that and we'll give you the ability to speak as well. But as we're waiting for some of those questions to come in about this particular session, I did see something in the chat box over here about if this presentation and recording will be shared with folks after. Absolutely. We want as many people and parents to engage with this as possible. So if you are on that Facebook group with the parents, please spread the word. We'll be able to post some of that stuff so that parents can engage with this. Whether they read the book or not, I think that those are some of the factors that are so important that I pulled from the text in order for students to and parents to engage in supporting their students working with us at CalArts. So I have a question for Melissa. What is some advice as a therapist working in college would you give to parents if they're concerned about their student?
Well, firstly, I would invite them in a similar way to the way you did in your presentation to really feed the idea of community, you know, because a sense of community, a sense of connection is a key ingredient like water for soup to move through transitions. And so I would invite them to build their own sense of community so that they can support their student in this new space, being college, in this new space to build community. If they have already been building community, and if it is a first opportunity and it's challenging them in a really special way, I would say start there, building community, little by little.
Thank you for sure. And I want to go to some of our attendees who have their hand raised. Kathleen. So we will promote you to being able to share. Hello, Kathleen. Just remember to unmute yourself as well. And that's at the bottom left-hand corner of the Zoom box.
Okay, got it.
Hi.
Can you hear me now?
I sure can.
Okay. I am not a helicopter mom, but I'm pretty close to that.
Yeah.
And I have some fears. I'm the older parent in the group. My child is also my grandnephew. And so he was adopted when I was 48. So it's just been him and I. And that's it. And everything he's ever needed, I've always been there for. So I am scared to death. I think he's ready when it's time to be on campus. I think he's there, but I still cut his apples. So I want to be sure that there's some way if he does need something, especially on deadlines, he's not great on deadlines, that somebody's chasing him all the time on those kinds of things. And I'm thankful that the school is small. He's a drummer, as you can probably hear. But he's going to be very successful. He's very talented, and he's very smart, but he's not driven as far as the academic side of things go. He went to a tiny private school. I don't think there were ever more than 8 or 10 kids in his class. And then 1 year of public school, and then he went to the art school for the arts. So he's always been coddled, and that, give me any advice, but I can't help but have coddled him. So he's my only child and my first child.
For sure. Well, thank you for sharing that, because I think, you know, while we don't particularly hold students' hands, there are some situations where that definitely does happen, because by the nature of whatever is navigating, it does. And what I will also say is that students of all learning abilities, what they've found to be so helpful to adjust to CalArts is just the fluidity of what they're learning and the benefit that they're in their art 24/7, always navigating an issue, the one thing they love the most, right? They're not in some boring, sorry, math folks, like calculus class they're forced to take. They're into their métier classes. They're talking about all of these things that they're experimenting with, or how this worked for them. So there's a little bit difference of students, again, meeting these benchmarks and their learning capabilities, and really adjusting, right? And so again, I understand completely about saying like, oh, I don't know, did he turn in that assignment? He'll learn what that is like if you don't turn in an assignment. And I will also say there's also flexibility with faculty about what that looks like and engaging in that. And so my best advice is, if it happens, to just encourage that communication between the faculty member, particularly for the student, because I tell students all the time, they come in here, oh, I didn't do this thing. And then the first question I ask is, did you speak with the faculty? And like 90% of the time, the answer is no. And it's like, hey, go ask them. If they say something else or don't say anything, let me know. And most of the time I don't hear from them, and they work it out. But it's that communication aspect that's very important that they're going to have to navigate, especially since we're not in the halls and, you know, they can't just go, hey, so-and-so. They have to really engage in that communication.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you so much, Kathleen, for sharing that.
Appreciate it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay, so we've got some questions as well. I see one here. It's, my son has enjoyed the breakout rooms during orientation. Do you think teachers will encourage more of that in classes? As I believe it is going to be really hard for kids to develop authentic relationships via Zoom. Yeah, so I can't speak for every single class at CalArts, but I do know I've been in some really great academic meetings where faculty have shared really creative aspects about how they're using Zoom and breaking folks up. Our classes by nature are very intimate, so there's a lot of that they're already getting up front that's just built into the fabric of our education. But I'm pretty sure that this is going to be a continuous thing. As someone who teaches somewhere else, I love a breakout room because it does engage some of this personal one-on-one. It starts to build those relationships. People start to get to know, you know, 4 boxes instead of 68 or 30 or even 20, right? And so that'll continue to do for sure moving forward. I'm going to answer this other question as well. I'm just going to read it aloud. My son tried to get an appointment more than once to see any of the therapists last year. When he was in crisis, it was turned away because none of their availability matched his schedule. They wouldn't let him miss class. I understand the need not to miss class, but one of the reasons we were so happy to send him to CalArts was the mental health support on campus. Any tips on how to get to someone to listen? So yeah, I'm sorry that the schedules never line up. If you know anything about CalArts, it is functioning on a 24/7 schedule. And unfortunately, our therapists do at some point have to go home. But if a student is having trouble navigating that, if they communicate that with us, there are ways in which we can help, either if it's not on the therapy side, but on the faculty side, that I can help navigate with the student and the faculty member. So I'm always happy to advocate for students, especially if they need help. And again, we do have a crisis counseling line the student can utilize and navigate. And now new this year, which was not present last year, is that healthy ESU opportunity that wasn't present, but that adds a continuous additional layer of therapy moving forward. So for sure, please reach out. Happy to encourage students there. Okay, what are your suggestions for getting my student to engage given this difficult online situation we are in? I think if he were there in person, he might engage and meet people, but he is not engaging in any of the social portions of orientation. Do either of my therapists feel like they have some advice for this? I'd like to hear from one of you. I see some head movement.
Hi. I mean, I think I'm also struggling, right, to find an exact answer for such a difficult question, right? That all we can do at some point is just keep encouraging And I guess when I'm working with students, I encourage them to just try and show up, right? And it's kind of like going to the gym. Like if you can just kind of put your track shoes on and go there and then see what happens. So you don't have to stay at the party. You don't have to stay on that Zoom link. You don't, at this point, like you don't even have to be on video, but can you at least kind of start to show up and get names or get faces and try and collect, all right, who's in my class? Or, you know, almost like pre-preparing, you know, questions that you might want to ask other students or you want to ask your teacher, ways to kind of lessen the nerves, right? And so I encourage them to, or even just find one person that they can make eye contact with, or that they can, you know, I mean, I've had students, even particularly in like character animation, where it's like, all right, I just need you to ask 3 people this week. Hey, how are you doing today? And like, that's the homework for the week in terms of, you know, how we're working on kind of opening them up, you know, to engaging. But what I'll also add, which I thought about in the beginning, is that we talk about how amazing college is and how exciting it is to show up. And we don't often talk about how much we lose when we go. And so there's also potentially a lot of sorrow and a lot of grief that goes along with this transition. And some of the sorrow and grief might be, well, I don't get to be on campus right now. Like I don't get to throw myself into this work. Like I'm now working from home, or I'm now still at home, where they were thinking this was an opportunity for them to kind of stretch their wings away from family. And now you all are still trying to kind of coexist. So to kind of find that, like both and that balance of approving and it's okay for you to be shy, and asking them like, what are maybe 1 or 2 things that you can do that you feel comfortable doing? And as a parent, you can certainly give some feedback that may make you just step out a little bit more. And think of it, I always call it like the runway. That this first semester, I tell students, you're just trying to find which cubbyhole to put your backpack in. Like that's all you kind of like need to do this first semester, right? Get a couple of names and know where your stuff belongs. So as a parent, all you're encouraging them to do is like find a name and find a person that maybe you can kind of latch on to, and take like these couple like baby steps, with the idea that in the second semester, in the second year, is really when they start to kind of find those really deep connections. So they don't have to do it right away, but they want to start right away.
Right, absolutely. And I think just to kind of piggyback off of that a little bit, is that sometimes we are struggling as professionals to get students to put the cell phone down and have this face-to-face conversation, right? And now we're in this flipped reverse reality that that's all they have right now because of the nature of COVID. And so they're already good at engaging over technology. And so it's really, like Randè said, is about engage, just put the gym shoes on. Just walk down to the stop sign and see how good you feel, right? And so that's a great answer. Thank you for leading us to that moment. Okay, so I saw a question about that's kind of FERPA related, and so I want to kind of talk about that. About the question is that my son doesn't care about, doesn't share much about anything. What happens when the student doesn't share about their work or their grades or whatever that looks like? And that is a huge transition, definitely from a K through 12 world, because, you know, you're just in it and on it. And in college, you know, a student through their FERPA, or really their Education and Rights Privacy Act, that they're able to say, I want my parents to know this, I want my parents to not know this. And even if the settings are on to say that my parents can have access to it, college does not reach out and send report cards, right? And so really it's about establishing that connection with your student about maybe it's not something they want to share every assignment, what they got on, right? Maybe it's something that you do a mid-semester check with your student to say, how are you feeling? How are you navigating, right? So us as an institution, we plan on reaching out to the students in week 4, week 7, and then right at the end at week 14, because we know, particularly with this transition, we want to reach out to them to say, how are you doing? how is this learning online for you? What are you struggling with, so that we can kind of move on? And maybe that's something that could be helpful for you and your student to say, like, I'm not going to be in your business, but I do want to hear about your artwork. What are you making? What did that look like? And maybe it's not just so factual about the grades, but also their progress, right? Their experience through that particular project, I think can be very helpful. Okay, so I also see a question here. If my student is somewhat hesitant or scared to seek out help, what can I do to encourage them to look into these resources? And Melissa, I think that's a good question for you to navigate.
I see this question as a great tie-in to one of the first questions about how to be supportive to your student. You know, you just gave a great suggestion when you're you know, recommending, you know, just inquiring in general terms about how they're doing, and not necessarily asking for every little detail of what they're doing and grades and so forth. But that's the kind of thing that sets the tone for ongoing conversation, and that hopefully invites them to volunteer information before you're asking, and that it doesn't have to be in crisis mode when conversations barely begin, but just in general. I think this is also tied in to the idea of community building that I mentioned earlier, and that, Randè, what you were sharing about the showing up is such an essential part of the community building process, and it can support a student in reaching out for resources. And let's say this is someone that does not feel confident or willing to seek out resources. A supportive parent could possibly remind the student that they have taken quite a number of risks already before they made it to CalArts. Sometimes it takes reminding ourselves of what brought us to the present moment. And a student in a situation like this one, which is of a life transition, a very important life transition, sometimes it takes reminding them, well, you have taken so many risks to get here. So you have it in you to take this other risk of reaching out to the supportive resources that are available, and definitely validating that it could feel difficult to do it, that it could be agitating to even think of doing it. And yet reminding them, you have what it takes, you've done it. That's how come you're here.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that. And, you know, I also think that it kind of wraps back to what Randè said, is that if a student's hesitant and reaching out and they're not sure about counseling and therapy, and I think it's a little bit about how we normalize what counseling and therapy is for. And I think a lot of society has said that something is initially wrong with you, and I really don't like that term, but there's something wrong with you in order to seek those services out, where quite frankly, therapy is a means to process and hold space for things that are swirling in here, swirling out here, and making some sort of sense with it or peace with it in order to move on. And that can be, I've received a really bad critique 2 weeks ago, and I'm still feeling some type of way about it. I can't shake it, right? And so we process with students those type of things very much all the way to, I'm concerned about this relationship I'm having with this person I'm dating, right? And so we need to normalize that this is not about something's wrong, because there isn't anything wrong. In fact, like, we think about physical health in a way where we should drink water and eat our fruits and veggies and go to the doctor and get a flu shot, right? We can take that in, but our mental health is just the same. And in fact, they're connected and not separated. So if we're gonna go see the doctor for our heart, you know, for heart conditions, we need to see our therapist and the like, to kind of navigate and continue to build our mental health, so that when we're building these resiliency and coping skills, we have the things moving forward and can kind of navigate what that looks like. So great question. I want to go on to the last, well, we have two questions, but I'm going to go on to one of the ones I've got up here. I anticipate that many first-year students will struggle to build community. What kinds of events online will be offered to help students connect? So a little bit about this is that we plan on to still, as much as possible, I know our director of campus life, they have been working so diligently over the last 2 weeks with their student leaders and orientation leaders to create all kinds of events. If you have not heard about those from your student, I encourage you to visit our orientation website and see for yourself. That is packed with events right now. It's going to continue to be that way. Our student leaders that we're going to be hiring are going to be programming during the week, at nights, over the weekend. We plan on having folks engage in things like online yoga because we want to continue to get them out of their chairs after being on Zoom all day, but also continue to connect that well-being, right? Moving forward. But there's a litany of game nights, and I know they had a slumber party the end of last week, and some of these events I've popped in on and they seem so exciting and kind of fun. So there are there. So as Randè said, encourage your student to step out there. We'll continue to provide those events throughout the semester as well. So I am going to, out of the nature of time, I want to introduce, oh, I know, but we're getting questions and I just want to keep answering them. Okay, so here's the thing. So I'm going to answer this question, and then Harmony, I'm going to throw it to you. So, okay, so this last question is that if you are a parent who's not a parent of a first-year student, but you feel like your student is still struggling to create that community, because they were impacted as well, right? COVID happened in March, ended halfway through their year and their connections. They are invited to show up to these orientation Zoom events and connect and make friends. And in fact, we have found a lot of second-year students or students going into their second year at CalArts join these events and start making friends with these students. They're encouraged to reach out to us. And if not, if they're looking for something particular and they're just not quite sure to where to find it, they can reach out to myself, and they can reach out to the director of campus life as well. And we can put that email into the chat so that if you want to send, you know, and have that conversation, and Just Love, who's our director of campus life, will be able to have that pointed conversation with your student. What is it that you want to get involved in? What is it that you want to do? And that's something I'm happy to do. And also, of course, Jess is happy to do. So thank you for that question. Thank you for your questions. I'm going to turn it over to Harmony.
Hi, this is Harmony Frederick, and it's such a pleasure to join you. There we go, you can see me now. So thank you for joining us. I'm the Director of Alumnx and Family Engagement here at CalArts, and our parents and families are a rich part of our CalArtian community, and we really hope that you'll remain involved and engaged with the Institute and with each other. So the first thing you can do as a parent or family member is participate in more events like this. There are going to be many more for you to attend in the coming months. So starting off tomorrow, there's actually 2 events that you could attend. The Herb Alpert School of Music's Welcome Back concert will occur at 5:30 p.m. PDT tomorrow. And throughout my presentation, if you go ahead and look in the chat, my friend Juan is putting in a lot of really great links for you to access all of these resources. In addition, Red Cat, our CalArts Downtown Center for Contemporary Arts, is kicking off their fall season soon. Red Cat is physically both a theater and gallery, and this fall is offering a whole host of virtual programming. So in the gallery right now, in reality, in a virtual gallery we've created, is Inside Out and Upside Down, posters from CalArts. And this exhibit honors the Institute's poster culture as a means of communication among our students at CalArts. And tomorrow night, you can join us for a free presentation that critically addresses the exhibition in relation to issues of inclusion and representation in the field of graphic design and graphic design education. Red Cat's full season will be released next week. Coming soon is CalArts Weekend, our annual fall festival, which is celebrating its 10th anniversary, October 15th through the 17th. This year, you can hear more about how CalArts collaborates with one another across disciplines, the connection of the work of our artists to social justice initiatives, and enjoy special performances and presentations. So the second thing you can do is we hope you'll connect with the Institute. So you should be receiving, hopefully already, the network. It's our every other week email with news and resources for alumni, parents, and families. We have the 24/700 blog, which shares the most up-to-date news about CalArts students, alumni, and faculty. We also have the Pool. That's our online magazine with in-depth feature articles and short, fun features. You should see a new edition of that in November. The third thing you can do, and I really hope you will, is to connect with one another virtually. So we have the CalArts Parents Facebook group, and hopefully you're involved, and if you're not, we hope you will be. It's really a forum for you to meet each other and share advice. And coming soon is a new platform called CalArts Connect. In October, we will send you information on how to join this new social and networking resource that we created for students and alumni, and describe more about how parents can be involved. So I want to thank you again for joining us. And Maria Victoria, can you share with us any last words of encouragement and advice?
Sure. I want to make sure that when we talk about taking care of our students, that we're also talking about taking care of ourselves. And so, and just know where your boundaries are, what your limitations are, and when you can ask for help too. When you feel at a loss, please feel free to reach out. We're happy to navigate conversations, hear you through, and even point you into the right direction. So we are so thankful for you all joining us and for your participation and your questions and sharing. And we look forward to participating and partnering with you in the future to support your students while they're at CalArts. Our next slide will have additional information for you all to reach out if you need to. Take a screenshot or a photo, write it down. The slide will be out for a few minutes, but thank you so much and have a good night, good morning, or wherever you may be.